Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Jessica Terrell, and I am from Raleigh, and I am Kentucky. I'm in the Training and Outreach Department for the North Carolina State Board of Elections. And tonight, I'm here to talk to you about some changes to the way that you vote in North Carolina, primarily about voter photo ID. So I'm using a PowerPoint presentation to help me. It'll be in 4 sections. The first section will be about the voter photo ID requirements. The second section will be about provisional ballots. The third section will be about voter registration, and the final section will be about residency requirements. So if you haven't already, I'll ask that you please silence your cell phone. And we can go ahead and get started. The first section will be about the new voter photo ID requirements. The first thing you need to know is that in 2019, voter ID is not required in any election. So if you voted in municipals in 2019, you will not be asked to show a form of photo ID. But starting with the 2020 primary, all voters will be asked to show an acceptable form of photo ID when presenting to vote in person. And any voter who is choosing absentee by mail will be asked to submit a copy of an acceptable form of photo ID. There are many forms of ID that are acceptable for voting purposes, and I will go through these one by one. So you can use your North Carolina driver license or a non-operator ID, and that card may not be expired by more than 1 year. You can use your U.S. passport or your passport card, and that also may not be expired by more than 1 year. You can use a U.S. military ID, a federal ID. Now the thing about this card, this is the first type of card that will not have an expiration limit on it. So my dad's a veteran of the U.S. Navy. I've seen his veteran ID. It doesn't have an expiration date on it because he's always a veteran. And so a poll worker would not be looking for an expiration date on a card like that. You can use the tribal membership card of a federally recognized tribe. This is another card that does not need to have an expiration date printed on it. You can use the tribal membership card of a state recognized tribe like Kalawasa Pony or Lumbee if they apply to us at the state board and we approve them. This is another card that doesn't need to have an expiration date on it, or the limit won't matter. The original process for this closed in March, but the legislature reopened that, and now the final deadline for the approval list is November 1. You can go to our website and see who we've already approved. You can use an approved student ID card from a state or a private university or from a community college. Now this card will need an expiration date on it, but not until 2021. So that if next year they're using it, if it doesn't have one, that's okay. But after that, it will need one. Same process as the tribal enrollment. That's going to conclude and be final November 1, and you can go online and see who we've already approved. You can use an approved employee ID from a state or local government agency, from a public or a charter school, or from a public university. Similar to the student ID, it doesn't have to have an expiration now, but it's going to need one by 2021. So the example I'm using there is my ID for the State Board of Elections. We applied to ourselves and we approved ourselves. So I can use my card. Now it doesn't have an expiration, it has an issue date. But for 2020, that'll be fine. After that, it won't be fine, and we'll maybe have to figure something out. But for 2020, it'll be okay. Same process for approval. You can go see who we've already approved. Now, for voters coming from another state, or they're coming from D.C., or territory or a commonwealth of the U.S., you can use your driver's license or your non-operator ID, but only if your registration was within 90 days of the election. So that would be for someone who maybe just moved in and hasn't gotten their new stuff yet. That card also may not be expired by more than 1 year. So for voters over the age of 65, there's a special provision in the statute for them. A voter who's over the age of 65 can use any form of ID even if it's expired, so long as it was not expired when that voter was 65 or older. So the example I've been given is my great-grandmother. She's 95 years old, and she has not driven in maybe 15, 20 years, something like that. But she still has her license from when she was driving, and the last time it was good, she was about 75. She doesn't need to try to get a non-operator ID. She doesn't need to try to renew that old one. She's not interested in doing any of those things. She can use that ID that she has. So that was a lot of options, and many people had at least one. I have 3 of those. But there are people who don't have any of those. And so the question is, what can they do? There's a new voter photo ID card that's available statewide for the purposes of voting. And the voter photo ID is provided free of charge. Getting one's pretty simple, so let's talk about what it would take to get one of these. In order to get the new free voter photo ID card, you come right here to your county board office, and you're going to fill out a form where you're going to provide them some information. You'll give them your name, you'll give them your date of birth, and you'll give them the last 4 digits of your social security number. Now that's going to be compared to the voter registration the county already has on file for you. If you're newly registering for the first time in your county, that application needs to process, so you may need to give them some time to do that first. They'll take your picture, and they'll either make your card right then, it takes about 60 seconds to come out of the printer, or they'll mail it to you in a few days. The voter photo ID is valid for 10 years from the day that you came in and you made that request. That initial request does need to be done in person. Now, when that card expires, it's not tied to your voter registration status. So it doesn't mean you're suddenly an inactive voter. It doesn't mean you're taken off the poll book. It means you're a more mature you 10 years later, and we'd like to take a picture of that more mature you. Now, when can you get it created? Anytime your county board office is open, except for a very small window between the last day of early voting and election day. The statute allows for election departments to not be making any IDs at that small window. Otherwise, they're open, you can get one then. If you lose this card, or somehow destroy or deface this card, you can have it replaced free of charge. If you have a name change and need to change the card or update it, you can have that done free of charge. There's no time that a voter would be charged to either get this card or have it replaced. So now you have to show some form of ID when you come in to vote. What is your experience going to be like? Let's talk about that. Well, you'll come to the voting site, you'll politely and patiently wait your turn. And then the precinct official will ask you to state your name, your address, as you typically experience now. And as you are stating that information, you're simultaneously showing that form of photo ID. It's all happening at the same time. And after looking over everything lines up, that official will give you your ballot. We want to talk about curbside voting as we've been traveling to the state. Curbside voting is somewhat underutilized. If you've ever been to a precinct and there's a special parking space with a sign and a little doorbell looking feature, that is curbside voting. And curbside voting is available in all precincts during early voting and on election day statewide. It's for a voter who can get themselves to the precinct, but for some reason has problems navigating inside the building, usually due to a disability or to age. So that voter can be serviced in their vehicle. Precinct worker comes out to them. You'll provide that person with your name and your address, and you'll also do an affirmation oath, essentially declaring, I am eligible to use curbside voting. And that's the person you show your photo ID to, starting in 2020. For absentee by mail, the voter who is choosing absentee by mail needs to submit a copy of an acceptable form of ID. If a voter is not able to do that, the voter can sign an affidavit, essentially declaring, I am not able to do that. There is a list of reasons that you would choose from identifying why you can't do that. And for absentee by mail, one of the options is, I don't have access to the method to make a copy. Military overseas citizen voting is not impacted by voter photo ID, and we'll talk more about that in another section. So the big question as we've been traveling the state this summer is, can I vote without a form of ID? Well, all voters will be allowed to vote with or without an acceptable form of photo ID. Now, starting with the 2020 primary, you will be asked to show one, and if you know you don't have one now, your best option is to come right here to your county board office and have one made for free. But if a voter appears in person without a form of photo ID, the voter can vote with a provisional ballot. They vote provisionally. There's 2 ways that ballot can be counted. The first way would be for a voter who has a form of ID, but it's not with them. So maybe they waited in line, that line was long. They get all the way to the front and they realize it's not in my bag, it's not in my wallet, but I have it. They can vote provisionally. You have until the last business day of canvass, about 10 business days, to come here to your county board office, show that form of ID. Then your ballot counts. That's option 1. The second option is for the voter to declare what's called a reasonable impediment. There's a reason why I cannot get a photo ID. And I'll explain that more in provisional ballots. This is a great place to stop and ask if there are any questions so far. Are there any questions? Yes.
Is all this information on your website?
It is.
So I don't have to take.
You don't have to scribble furiously.
Okay.
It is all there.
Thank you.
Yes.
Will some of those lists of documents be available to the precinct officials on election day?
When you say documents, what do you mean?
Well, you know, the list of what's acceptable IDs.
Oh, sure, we're making the flip chart now.
Rules as far as.
Yes.
Expired.
Expiration date.
Yes.
We're developing materials for that now, yes. Are there other questions? Okay, let's go into provisional ballots. So a provisional ballot can be given to a voter for many different reasons. It's usually because there's a question about something. It could be there's a question about if that voter is qualified to vote. A question about if that voter is eligible to vote in that election. If that voter should be using that particular ballot style. And now if there's a question about the voter's photo ID. And as I mentioned just a moment ago, if a voter presents to vote in person without a form of ID, the voter will be offered a provisional ballot. Two ways that ballot can count. The first way is, again, they have one, but it's not with them. They will come here and show it before the end of canvass. And the second way is to choose what's called a reasonable impediment. So let's talk about those reasonable impediments. The first one is the inability to obtain a photo ID due to a set of reasons that the voter will need to choose from. The list is lack of transportation, disability or illness, lack of birth certificates or the other underlying documents that you need to obtain a photo ID, your work schedule, or family responsibilities. Those are all reasons that someone can choose for inability to obtain. There are a few other reasonable impediments. Lost or a stolen photo ID. Your photo ID has been applied for, but you haven't gotten it yet. The best example of that is the DMV. So when you go there, you don't get the physical card anymore. They give you like a piece of paper. And they say to you that's just as good as your driver's license. It may be for them, it's not for us. So for the purposes of voting, you have to have the physical card. If you haven't gotten it yet, that's your no. Or some other reason that the voter will need to describe on that affidavit. There will be space to write the explanation. There are two other what's called qualifying exemptions for presenting a photo ID. One is a religious objection to being photographed. And the second one is natural disaster. That's a very, very specific and narrow impediment. The disaster needs to have occurred 100 days prior to the election, and your area needs to be declared a disaster by the president or the governor. So that if New Hanover County had a hurricane, McDowell County probably can't have anyone declared a natural disaster. So no one will be turned away because they didn't have a form of photo ID on election day. The provisional ballot system is how any voter can cast their ballot on election day. And then the issue that caused the problem where they needed to vote provisionally can be sorted out during canvass. Are there any questions about provisional ballots or about reasonable impediments? Okay, great. So let's move on to voter registration. Does it hurt to review? It may be reviewed for some of you in the room. How can I register to vote? In order to register to vote in North Carolina, you must meet the qualifications and you must complete a voter registration application. The qualifications to vote in North Carolina include the following. You must be a citizen of the United States. You must reside in the county you're trying to register in at least 30 days prior to the election. You have to be at least 18 years old. And you cannot be serving a sentence for a felony conviction that includes probation or parole. So when a person's been convicted of a felony in North Carolina, they've lost their citizenship rights, the right to vote. But it's while they're serving their sentence. Once they're finished serving that sentence, including probation or parole, those rights are restored. And at that time, they can register again and vote again. That's not automatic. If they were registered before, it will automatically re-register them. They can apply again when they're finished serving their entire time.
So they have to reapply.
Yes, they will have to apply. But they are eligible to. Okay? So a 17-year-old can register to vote and vote in a primary if they will be 18 in time for the general election. And a future voter can pre-register up to 2 years ahead of their 18th birthday. That's typically done at the DMV getting that first very first driver's license. Now, where can you register to vote? Well, first, let me point out our handy dandy website, ncspe.gov. We have voter registration forms on our website as a PDF, but you cannot register to vote online in North Carolina. You must complete the application, you have to sign it, so wet signature, right? You have to submit that form. If you can't go to the website and get a form, there's a few places you can go in person. Now, if you want to take a lovely scenic drive to downtown Raleigh, the State Board of Elections, we'd love to see you, and we'll put one in your hand. You can come right here to your County Board of Elections office and get some. We have some here. Can you take some with you? You can go to a public library. You can go to a public high school or to a public university. Or in your area, you may see a voter registration drive where an organization put one together and they're giving out applications or accepting them and turning them in. All of those are places where you can get an application. There also are some agencies that service their clients with voter registration services. And the best example of that is the DMV. So if you change your address with the DMV, they usually ask you, do you want to update your voter registration? And almost everyone says yes, and then suddenly you have this postcard that you need to sign and send back. So the DMV just serviced you as a client of theirs with your voter registration. There are other agencies that can assist, like social services, public health, disability services like deaf and hard of hearing, and employment security. All of these agencies can assist their clients with voter registration services. Now there is a deadline for voter registration that's 25 calendar days before each election. And what often happens is voters will fill out that application and they'll mail it to Raleigh. And we'll be thrilled to get mail. And we'll open it and it says, oh, this is a registration for McDowell County. And we'll fold it back up and put it in a new envelope and address it to Marion and mail it right back here where it came from. Well, you lost time in the mail, right? It had to come all the way around, come all the way back. I don't know, maybe what, a week or two you might lose? And that's how sometimes people miss that deadline. So if you miss this deadline, can you still vote in the upcoming election? Yes. Oh, McDowell County is on a roll. This is the first time where everybody says yes. Right off of that, I'm excited. Same day registration, right? There's a way you can clear that up. If you missed that deadline or if you need to change your address, it wasn't quite right. Same day registration is the best time to fix that. We love early voting. Now, if you need to register during early voting, that same day registration, you have to bring something with you to prove your residence, because that postcard system, no time for that, right? You're right there in person. So I'll show you some things you can bring. You can bring that North Carolina driver license or that non-operator ID. Now your address on this document must be current because you're registering for the first time. For the voter photo ID that we mentioned earlier, that address does not need to match what's in the poll book. The poll book is only checking your identity. You can use a utility bill, a bank statement, a government paycheck, or some other government document with your name and your current address. And a college student can use their campus ID and proof of campus habitation. Now, if you need to update your voter registration, you have to use that registration form. There's no way to do that online. You need to change your name, or change your address, or change your party. You have to use the application. I want to talk about military and overseas citizens because there's ways to help them vote while they're away from home. We want them to participate too, and they can, and they should. So, there's two ways they can do that. The first way is the same absentee ballot request form that any of us can use if we want to use absentee ballot. Kind of slow moving wheel, right? You have to use the postal service. If it has to go overseas, I mean, we're talking a long time now, right? So that's kind of slow. So that's when we really come up with the second one, which is a federal program. It allows for those who are in the military or overseas to use different methods, like email. They can email all their stuff, where no one else can do that unless you're using that federal program. They also get more time to submit and more time to request. So we really push the federal program. To learn more about that, you can go to sbap.gov. And as a reminder, military overseas citizen voting is not impacted by voter photo ID requirements. Are there any questions about voter registration?
The college ones that you said.
Sure.
They have to apply to you, they have this specific college has to apply to you to be for their voter ID accepted.
For their student ID to be,
Yeah.
yes, that's right. Other questions? Okay, we're in the home stretch with residency. So So what address do you use when you are registering to vote? Your permanent residential address, and the statute defines that as the place where you live, the place to which you return when you have been absent. Now that's a broad and stretchy, and so we'll talk about why that is in just a couple of slides. If you temporarily relocate, can you vote? Absolutely, please do. The main way people do that is absentee by mail. Encourage people to do that and keep on voting, even while you're away from home. But if you change your permanent residential address, you cannot vote based on your old one. You also need to update your voter registration. And if you miss that deadline, you can do same day and fix it all. We want to highlight what the procedure is for a person who's experiencing homelessness. So if a person does not have what's called real property associated with their residence, they don't have an address, the location of their usual sleeping place is what they can use to determine their precinct and have residency established for them. And that's why that definition of residence is so broad. It would be to accommodate someone who's experiencing homelessness. Most people overlook it, but on the voter registration application, there's actually a little map area that says if you don't have a physical address, you can map out where in the county you usually sleep, and that's how the county can place you in the precinct and still register you, and you can still. I want to talk about college students because this is something we get a lot of calls about at the state board, because people are coming into North Carolina to come to college, or they're leaving, or they're moving kind of within counties, and we get a lot of questions about where do college students vote in North Carolina. So they have two choices. The first option is to decide that the college campus community is home, and that's where they want to register and vote. They don't have to decide they're going to stay there after graduation to decide that for those 4 years, that's where they live and that's where they want to register and vote. The second option is to decide that where they came from is home, and they want to maintain their registration there. And that student needs to either go home and vote in person or use absentee by mail. Now, a common reason we get phone calls, someone's mom called the state board, and their sweet pea sugar snap came home to vote and waited in line and was not in that folder. And they're trying to figure out why that is. Okay, so you're in McDowell County, where does your sweet pea sugar snap go to college? Okay, he does. He goes to App. Oh, that's in Watauga. Okay, so he was frolicking the campus of Appalachian. It's beautiful campus, right? Just frolicking, and then comes across a sign that says free pizza. And he wants to know what can he do to get a free pizza. He walks right on in there and says, oh, complete a voter registration application. We'll give you 2 slices of pepperoni pizza. And he said, oh shoot, I'm registered at home. This is easy. Fills it out, turns it in, walks away with pizza. He said the best evening all week is he got free food. Not realizing what he said. He's just registered and we're talking. And he may think that it's not going to matter, but it does, because in North Carolina he can make that choice. And so that's why sweet pea sugar snap is not registered in McDowell anymore. That is a common error that college students make while they're away. So we want everyone to know, a college student registers in their campus community is good cancel their home registration, and they'll be registered in that county. Now, we must ask you to please vote in only one place. There's no hop around, skip around, jump around. Vote where you should be. That is called double voting. It is a class I felony. The same kind of felony for lying on your voter registration application, for example. Please don't do that. It's against the law. So that's a lot of information that I gave you. Pretty succinct timeline there. I've been doing it all summer. And so the main question is, how are we notifying the public? So much information to know. And I want to highlight what we're doing at the state board to notify the public about these changes. So twice in 2019 and twice in 2020. All residential addresses in the state of North Carolina will receive a mail describing some of the information we talked about, what IDs are acceptable, and what to do if you need to get a free ID. If you go to municipals in your county this year, you'll see a nice big blown-up poster explaining what IDs will be acceptable. Starting in 2020, you should go get a free one if you don't have one. Precinct official training is being written right now. We hope that'll work as word of mouth. Just like this seminar will work as word of mouth, all counties had to have 2 of these seminars between May 1st and September 1st, and this is McDowell's second. Our birthday is at 10 o'clock this morning. Local organization. Now, if you're in a church group, a service club, and you think our presentation should be in front of your group, I think so too. You can come talk to me afterwards. I'll give you my card, and we'll be more than happy to schedule something and come back out here and present. This entire presentation is available on our website as a PDF. If you're interested in having it, And the final thing I would like to highlight is that any registered voter who's not a client of the DMV, so they don't have a driver license or non-operator ID, gets a special notice saying, hey, you don't have those common forms that a lot of people have, and we want to let you know these are the other forms. If you don't have one of those, you should get a free one at your county office. Now, McDowell County would love to have you working with them. Seems like some people here already work with McDowell County. That's wonderful. But if you don't, please talk to Kim and see what you can do to help get involved. Just want to show you a couple of things. This is our website, it's csbe.gov. This is our homepage here. Changes around every now and then. And we have a voter ID page. Now, on this page, you can see seminars that are upcoming. We're pretty much at the end of our last week of the statutory requirements, so you may not see that many left to do. If you don't see a county you're curious about, we've already done that county. Over in the right-hand side, the voter ID request form, you can print it out and fill it out ahead of time if you'd like. We also have that big blow-up poster. You can print it out here as a PDF for flyers if you'd like. And for some light reading, the statute in its entirety is available here on our voter ID website, as well as any rules that are in development. Like right now, the reasonable resemblance rule is in development. And finally, I'd like to highlight election security. We do many things at the state board and on the county level to keep the vote safe and secure in North Carolina. We have all the information here on our website. If you throw those questions at me, I will refer you to the website. So please, you can go to the website and click on election security and find out more about what we do. Now that's all I have for you tonight, but I'm happy to take any final questions that you may have about anything we've discussed so far. Are there any questions?
Just about what we've already discussed.
Oh, well, I don't know if I can answer too much more. If there are no questions, I want to thank you for coming out tonight and listening to my presentation. I'll be lingering if you have any other questions or if you need my business card. Thank you so much.